last thing I want to hit today, and this is it's a very, I've been kind of chomping at the bit wanting to get to this story and talk about it again, and that has to do with this, should we call out, or why denounce white supremacy? Why denounce white supremacy? And I want to explain something that I think is really important to understand. If you remember, at the very first presidential debate, just last week, President Trump debating Joe Biden, and that, horrible commentator, horrible moderator, Chris Wallace, who gets away with murder because he looks like Poindexter, and he seems so innocent. He doesn't sound angry. He just seems kind of like intellectual, and he's a leftist who used that debate to pummel Trump and to prop up Biden. That's all he did. That's why he agreed to do the debate. The questions were so obnoxiously supportive of Biden and critical of Trump. But I want to get the one question he asked about white supremacy. You may recall that during that debate, Chris Wallace, again, as though this hasn't been a topic like 150 news stories at least, Chris Wallace came back and Trump and said, Joe Biden, you said you launched your presidential campaign because you were so upset that President Trump said, that there were good people on both sides on the white supremacy debate, which is not what he said. And Chris Wallace knows that's not what President Trump said, and Joe Biden knows that's not what President Trump said. But Wallace repeats a lie. Biden, of course, goes along, oh, yeah. And so he goes back to President Trump and says, can you denounce white supremacy? Let's put a comma there, and I want to tell you a couple really, really, really important things to understand. And the reason I'm doing that is not just to hash over the last debate, because that's over, thank God, but we're going to apparently have another one on October 15th. And for reasons unknown to sane America, somehow, when you have the Presidential Debate Commission come up with who the sides agree to be commentators, the next moderator, the Chris Wallace of debate number 2 on October 15th, is another Biden bootlicking leftist who is going to be the one doing this moderating. So the idea this is going to be fair questions this time is absurd. You got a Biden guy named Steve Scully, who formerly, he's intern for Biden. He's a leftist, Biden supporting guy. Somehow we're stuck with him as a moderator for the second debate. I think the third debate should have to have, I don't know, me, or maybe Tucker Carlson, somebody who's conservative, given that we have to put up with 2 leftists. But anyway, I want to talk about this white supremacy thing. And I want to mention something really, really important. In the past, in my life, I have worked with candidates, helping them with messaging, helping them moving forward as they're going to be running for a political office. I have gone with candidates to training by some of the top premier messaging, candidate training people who help candidates understand how to speak, help them hone their message, help them come up with what message they think they want to have, they want associated with their campaign, help them understand how to respond to questions, help them understand how to respond to very hostile reporters and questions from anyone. And the point of it is, I've been to those trainings and I've listened to how these very highly trained professionals teach candidates about speaking to the public, teach candidates about how you respond when you get accusatory questions. And I want to tell you something really important. Do you remember when Richard Nixon, his famous line after Watergate was exposed, after the fact that he had erased 17 seconds or whatever it was, and the recording in his office was exposed, and President Nixon's famous line, I am not a, and if I were speaking in person, I would say, fill in the blank, and everyone in the whole room would say, crook. President Nixon said, I am not a crook. If you ask anyone what he is remembered for, besides the endless resigned in disgrace, people will say, oh yeah, he's the one who said, I'm not a crook. What they remember was President Nixon talked about crook. And this gets around to what I'm talking about in training people about how to speak. When candidates are taught and just talked to about how they should respond to accusations, especially false accusations, a key lesson is you don't repeat the accusation against yourself. If someone says, are you an embezzler? Are you a bank robber? You don't answer, I am not an embezzler. I am not a bank robber. You don't do that, because what the public remembers is, what did that person talk about? Oh yeah, he said something about being a bank robber or embezzler. People remember the words coming out of your mouth. They associate them with you. And so you're taught to answer more along the lines of saying, I have always conducted my affairs honestly. I have always conducted my relations with my campaign or with that organization with the highest integrity. I have always followed the law. Those kind of statements. You don't repeat the accusation. You have to understand, please, you can take it to the bank, believe me, when Chris Wallace asked that question of President Trump in that debate, he is drooling to get President Trump to say the words white supremacy. That's his point. That's the reason he asked the question. He's not asking the question to give the president the opportunity once and for all to say, I do not support white supremacy. He is trying to get the president to say those words. This is what his mission was. And President Trump knows this, and Chris Wallace knows this, and Joe Biden knows this, and everybody else who's ever been in politics knows this. And so you have the president aware of what Chris Wallace is trying to do, trying to attach the label of white supremacists to President Trump. Now, President Trump has, on I think it's like 17 occasions or some crazy number like that, President Trump has said numerous times, when I said good people on both sides, I'm talking about people who support tearing down Civil War era statues of people who served in the South and people who are against tearing down statues. He said, I'm talking about people who support pulling down statues, people who support leaving them in place. That's what I was talking about when I said that they're the good people on both sides. President Trump has said this over and over and over. His spokesmen have said this. His supporters have said this. It is not like President Trump hasn't denied that. And Chris Wallace knows this. The next guy, I can almost guarantee you, the next guy, this Steve Scully guy, who in the world knows why we agreed to that, but Steve Scully is going to find some way to again work that in and understand they're not working it in because they're trying to get a straight answer out of President Trump. He's already answered over and over and over and over. They're trying to force him to utter those words because they know the same thing that all the top-notch trainers in the country know, that you don't repeat words, accusations against yourself, because what people will take away is, oh, that's what they are. Now, so that's the first point I wanted to make about this. It's so important to understand. Second point on this whole white supremacist thing and Kenosha. You recall the context. Chris Wallace is saying, well, in Kenosha, blah, 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 blah. And another lie the left has worked into the entire American political conversation, and no one on the Democrat media mob left will ever call them out. But the whole incident in Kenosha involving the young man, Kyle Rittenhouse, had nothing to do with white supremacy. Nothing. I want to urge you, if you haven't seen this video, on my website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under shows, drop-down list of links, you can watch an 11-minute video. An 11-minute video that covers the entire incident and explains the incident that occurred in Kenosha with this young man, Kyle Rittenhouse, eventually firing a weapon. He was there to try to defend the property being destroyed by rioters. He also happened to be a trained medic and was also there to help people if they had been injured. He was there to be a supporter of law and order, to keep the violent mob from destroying property and hurting people. Nothing that happened in Kenosha had anything at all to do with white supremacy. And Chris Wallace knows that. And Joe Biden knows that. And Donald Trump knows that. And everybody on the ground knows that. But what you had in Chris Wallace, the most despicably dishonest question, and there were a lot of them, despicably dishonest question, was an attempt to reaffirm a media lie that Kenosha violence was tied to white supremacy, had nothing to do with it, and the lie to try to attach that label to President Trump. So I urge you to go to my website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, and under shows, drop down list of links, listen to the 11-minute video about Kyle Rittenhouse, because you have to understand how much the first debate was a setup by Chris Wallace, an attempt to set up President Trump into cornering him. When they asked President Trump to denounce white supremacy, you have to understand they are making an accusation of him, to him. This is why they asked the question. They're trying to make him say it. They're making an accusation. And President Trump, after having the 17 or more times he has denounced it and denied it and rejected it, does not have to continue playing that game with them. Related to that, but we're out of time, so I can't get into it today, but related to that, all of this effort to pull back from the previously very, very popular effort of the American left to spread critical race theory, which was essentially a theory which has nothing to it at all, no intellectual content, no academic, no history, nothing other than critical race theory was something cooked up by leftists as another means of dividing America along the lines of race. Critical race theory is directly intended to divide America along the lines of race and to paint America as a racist country. It's the entire purpose of that theory, nothing else. And so President Trump wisely decided we're not doing this. Again, tied to what the left tries to do in this whole white supremacy thing, the left in this country uses very long ago incidents to justify the radical Marxism they're trying to impose on America today. They work very hard to divide America along racial lines, very hard to engender hatred and suspicion between the races in America. And this is what you have the left in this country doing in this election cycle in 2020. And you have President Trump standing up for the idea of America and the goodness of America. You know, in closing, I'm going to go in just one moment to why it matters to you. I want to tell you that Katie Hopkins was in town last week, and so she joined me in studio. And one thing she said in that interview that has just resonated, I can't tell you people I hear from talking about it, but just resonated, was the idea that what you're really being invited to do in this election cycle and coming behind President Trump, you're being invited to come home to America. You're being invited to shut out the hatred, the division, the anger, the accusations against America, spewing out of left-wing America, and come home to the idea of America, to come home to the love of America, to come home to the goodness of America. That's what the right in this country stands for today. That's what President Trump stands for. That's what America is. And that is the invitation of the of people who are supporting President Trump and of the Republican Party, is come home to the goodness of America and reject all the ugly divisiveness the left is trying to bring. If you didn't see that video, the interview, go to our YouTube page for America Can We Talk or any of the other social media places you hear this show and listen to the interview with Katie Hopkins. It was pretty fun, pretty stellar. I love her positive message. As she goes around the country supporting President Trump, one of her main messages is, her main points, main messages is that we need to come back to the love of America, come home to the side that loves this country, that's trying to unite this country and not divide this country. Put the division of the left to the side, ignore them, reject them, refute them, do not play along with them, do not get sucked into their game of division. Come home to the greatness and uniqueness of America.